The investigator stopped mid-sentence. Her pen hovered over the transaction report, then circled a cluster of withdrawals in blue ink. She didn't look up when she asked, "Why were these withdrawals broken into these amounts?" Across the table, my brother Ryan shifted in his chair. His attorney, Mark Feldman, leaned forward slightly, hands folded. "This is a civil matter," Mark said evenly. "A family disagreement about financial assistance. There's no criminal component here." The investigator continued scanning the page. 9 withdrawals, she said. 18 days, each under 10,000. Ryan gave a short exhale. "Our father doesn't like large transfers. He prefers smaller amounts." She made a note. "The total moved during that period was 84,600, she said. Mark nodded once, as if that confirmed something ordinary, and all of it authorized. I remained quiet. The office was neutral, fluorescent lighting, a state seal mounted behind her desk, 2 folders open, one containing transaction logs, the other medical documentation provided by the bank's compliance unit. Ryan glanced at me briefly. "She tends to escalate things," he said. "Dad asked for help. She turned it into an investigation." I did not respond. The investigator flipped to the next page. 4 cashier's checks, she continued, issued within 9 days, endorsed by you. "Yes," Ryan said, "for household expenses, property maintenance, ongoing costs." "And the debit card reissue?" she asked. "Dad misplaced it." She wrote something down. Mark adjusted his cuff. "There's nothing unlawful about assisting a parent. Families move money between accounts every day." "That's correct," the investigator said calmly. "They do." She tapped the transaction sheet lightly. "What I'm reviewing is clustering." Ryan's jaw tightened. "It's not clustering. It's routine management." "The timing matters," she said. Silence settled across the table. She turned to the second file. "This is the cognitive screening summary submitted to the bank," she said. Ryan sat straighter. It was precautionary. The investigator read quietly for several seconds. "Screening score 21 out of 30, she said. "Noted mild impairment." "He was still legally competent," Mark said quickly. She continued reading. "Assistance agreement executed 5 days after the screening." Ryan nodded, "because he wanted help." The investigator turned a page. "The account access permissions were modified 3 days before the agreement was signed." Mark's pen stopped moving. "That's administrative sequencing," he said, "not misconduct." She looked at him. "It's sequencing," she agreed. Ryan shifted his attention toward me. "She doesn't understand how financial reporting works. She sees patterns where there aren't any." I kept my hands folded in my lap. Weeks earlier, when the bank first denied my requests for updated statements, the explanation had been procedural. "You are not listed as authorized contact. Please refer to the designated financial assistant." Designated. Within 12 days, there'd been 3 access changes. The online password reset twice, 11 ATM withdrawals, 6 electronic transfers under 10,000, then the cashier's checks. I'd downloaded what I could before access disappeared, archived correspondence, requested full statements through formal channels, submitted a written inquiry to the bank's internal compliance division when the monitoring flag appeared on a quarterly summary. I had not accused anyone. I had requested clarification. The investigator closed the medical file halfway. "When did your father last manage his own transfers?" she asked. Ryan hesitated, then answered, "Before he asked me to step in." "Was that before or after the screening?" Mark interjected. "This is becoming circular." She ignored him. Ryan looked at the table. "After," he said. She wrote that down. The scratch of her pen sounded measured. "Were any of the 9 withdrawals made in cash at the counter?" she asked. "Yes, he prefers cash." "And the remaining?" "ATM." She nodded once. Mark leaned forward. "If there's confusion about reporting thresholds, we're happy to provide additional documentation, but implying structure suggests intent. That's inappropriate." She finally met his eyes. "When withdrawals are broken into consistent amounts below reporting triggers, they require review. Not accusation, review." Ryan looked at me again, irritation visible now. "You could have just talked to me," he said. I requested statements. You filed with compliance. Yes. The investigator closed both folders fully this time, but kept her hand resting on top of them. There is another point, she said. Neither of them spoke. The assistance agreement is 17 pages. It grants financial control authority. Ryan nodded, with Dad's consent. It was signed after the cognitive flag was added to his medical file. That doesn't invalidate it, Mark said. It introduces vulnerability analysis. No one spoke. She opened the transaction file again and slid a separate memo from inside. This is an internal bank compliance notation, monitoring activity initiated due to pattern similarity to structured movement. Mark's composure shifted slightly. That's an automated software submittal, not a human conclusion. It's a trigger, she said. Triggers exist for a reason. Ryan's voice hardened. Are you suggesting I exploited my father? I'm reviewing whether the pattern meets statutory criteria, she said calmly. Another pause. Then she asked one more question. Who suggested the assistance agreement? Ryan answered immediately. Dad did. And who contacted the drafting attorney? Silence. Mark cleared his throat. My office prepared it. At whose request? Ryan didn't answer right away. The investigator made another note. The room remained still. Finally, she stacked the files neatly. This matter, she said, is no longer being evaluated solely as a civil disagreement. Mark inhaled slowly. On what basis? On the combined presence of structured withdrawal indicators, documented cognitive decline, and pre-execution access modification. Ryan stared at her. That's a reach. It's a classification under review, she said. No emotion, no emphasis, just procedure. We will be requesting additional documentation, including original authorization records, medical timeline verification, and internal compliance communications. Mark stood first. We will cooperate. Ryan remained seated a moment longer. This is unnecessary, he said. She didn't respond to that. Instead, she pulled a small yellow tab from her desk drawer and placed it on the edge of the file. She wrote 2 words on it. Then she closed the folder. Patterns like this require review. No one spoke after that. As we stood, I noticed the edge of the tab before the file disappeared into her cabinet. It read, Exploitation Review. The bank representative didn't lower her voice. I'm sorry, she said, staring at her screen. You're not listed as an authorized contact. Ryan stood slightly behind me, hands in his pockets. She's been told that, he said, multiple times. The lobby was quiet. Mid-morning, 2 customers seated near the investment desk. A compliance notice framed on the wall behind the teller line. I was listed for 8 years, I said calmly. I need confirmation of when that changed. The representative hesitated, then read directly from her monitor. Primary online access updated on March 14. Secondary contact removed March 16. Debit card reissued March 18. Ryan stepped forward. Dad asked me to streamline everything. She nodded at him, not at me. Only designated financial assistants can request statements now. Designated. I did not argue. I requested printed confirmation of the modification dates. They declined. Internal system notes aren't distributable, she said. Ryan exhaled as if this were exhausting. You're making this harder than it needs to be, he told me quietly. I left without responding. 5 days earlier, on March 9th, my father had completed a cognitive screening during a routine neurology follow-up. Score, 21 out of 30. Mild impairment noted. Recommendation, monitoring. I obtained the summary directly from the clinic's medical records department after discovering I was removed from the contact list on March 12th. The removal had been processed at 10:42 a.m. No one informed me. When I called the clinic, the receptionist confirmed financial decisions are being handled by his son now. Not legal guardian, not conservator, son. The 17-page voluntary financial assistance agreement was signed on March 19, drafted by Mark Feldman's office. Ryan had scheduled the appointment. The signature appeared steady. The date was typed, not handwritten. Within 12 days of the screening, 3 access changes had occurred. The password was reset twice. 11 ATM withdrawals followed. 6 electronic transfers were processed under $9,500 each. Then, 4 cashier's checks were issued in Ryan's name. Total moved during that cluster, $84,600. When I asked Ryan about it at dinner, he didn't look up from his phone. He was fine, he said. You're reading into numbers. His wife, Laura, placed her glass down carefully. You've always been suspicious. It's exhausting. I did not respond. Instead, I asked for a copy of the assistance agreement. It's private, Ryan said. I'm his daughter, and I'm the one handling it. The following week, I requested full transaction histories through certified mail. The bank responded in writing. Per customer authorization dated March 19, account oversight has been delegated. You are not authorized to receive further disclosures. I archived the letter. On March 22nd, the debit card was used for 3 consecutive withdrawals, $8,900, $8,700, and $8,950. 2 days later, 2 more withdrawals, $9,200 and $9,100. On March 27th, a cashier's check for $21,000 was issued. On March 29th, another for $18,400. When I asked Ryan what the checks were for, he answered, property expenses. Which property? He didn't specify. I requested written invoices. He didn't provide them. Instead, he said, you're turning Dad against me. I hadn't spoken to Dad about it. Laura called me the next afternoon. He doesn't need stress. You need to stop digging. I documented the call time. The next morning, I contacted the bank's internal fraud and compliance unit. Not an accusation, a request for review. I attached the cognitive screening summary dated March 9th, the assistance agreement dated March 19, a transaction summary highlighting the 9 withdrawals, and confirmation of access removal on March 16. 3 days later, I received an acknowledgement number. No promises, just confirmation that the documentation had been received. Ryan learned about the compliance inquiry when the branch manager called him. He arrived at my apartment that evening. You filed internally, he asked. I requested review. You escalated this outside the family. It's within the bank. He shook his head. You don't understand how reporting thresholds work. I didn't answer, because I did. On April 2nd, I requested a full copy of the assistance agreement from Mark's office directly. He responded with a summary letter, not the full document. Your father retains full autonomy. Mr. Ryan Collins acts solely in administrative capacity. Administrative. On April 5th, I obtained a copy of the agreement through the county filing clerk. 17 pages. Paragraph 8 granted check writing authority. Paragraph 11 authorized online access changes. Paragraph 14 permitted asset liquidation if deemed necessary for household stabilization. The cognitive screening was not referenced anywhere. The screening date preceded the agreement by 10 days. I highlighted that. On April 8th, the bank's compliance unit contacted me by phone. They did not confirm findings. They asked for clarification regarding timing. Specifically, when did I become aware of the screening score? When were access permissions modified? When were the first clustered withdrawals processed? I answered using documented dates. They thanked me and said the matter would be reviewed under internal monitoring protocols. That same afternoon, Ryan attempted to transfer title of my father's vehicle. I learned this from a notice mailed to my father's address requesting lien verification. The transfer had been initiated April 7th. No sale contract attached, just title reassignment paperwork. I printed the notice. Then, I requested preservation of transaction records through certified correspondence addressed to the bank's compliance division. I referenced potential exploitation statutes under state code. I did not accuse. I requested preservation. On April 12th, the branch denied another in-person request for statements. You're not authorized, the teller repeated. Ryan stood beside me. Again. She thinks everything is a conspiracy, he told the teller lightly. I remained silent. Later that evening, I reviewed the timeline again. March 9th, screening score 21 out of 30. March 14th, primary access update. March 16th, my removal confirmed. March 19th, assistance agreement executed. March 22nd through March 29th, clustered withdrawals and cashier's checks. April 7th, vehicle title transfer initiated. The sequence did not require interpretation. It required documentation. On April 15th, I I received a brief email from the bank's internal unit. Your inquiry has been forwarded for regulatory evaluation. Additional documentation may be requested. No further explanation. The following week, the State Financial Crimes Division contacted me for preliminary intake. They asked for copies of everything. I sent 26-page transaction summary, 8-page medical screening documentation, 17-page assistance agreement, certified mail receipts, compliance acknowledgement letter. Ryan called 2 hours later. You went to the state? He asked. I responded to a request. You're blowing this up. I submitted documents. There was a pause. This was a civil disagreement. I did not respond because the documentation was no longer inside the family. It was inside a system. 3 days later, I received a formal notice. Case intake accepted. Preliminary review initiated. No conclusions, just movement. That same afternoon, the bank placed a temporary notation on the account. Monitoring status elevated. Ryan called again. What did you do? I requested review. You could have handled this privately. I looked at the screening score one more time. 21 out of 30. Then I opened the assistance agreement and reread the signature date. March 19, 5 days after my removal from medical contact. The pattern was intact. I forwarded the final batch of documents to the assigned investigator. No commentary attached, just evidence. The next morning, an email arrived. We are assessing whether the activity meets statutory criteria beyond civil classification. I archived it and waited. The call from internal compliance came at 9:12 a.m. The woman on the line introduced herself only by first name and department. Her voice was even, measured, trained for neutrality. She confirmed receipt of the documentation packet I had submitted. Account access modifications, cognitive screening dated March 9th, showing a score of 21 out of 30, the 17-page financial assistance agreement signed 10 days later, transaction logs, and copies of 4 cashier's checks. We are conducting a preliminary review, she said. Certain activity requires enhanced evaluation. She referenced the timeline precisely. 3 access permission changes within 12 days, 11 ATM withdrawals, 6 electronic transfers structured just under federal reporting thresholds, 4 cashier's checks totaling $41,200 deposited into an external credit union account. Total movement across 18 days, $84,600. There was a pause before she continued. When transaction patterns approach federal reporting thresholds repeatedly within a condensed period, they are assessed for structure. I asked whether the matter had been escalated beyond internal review. We are unable to discuss specific filings, she replied, but the matter has been elevated to the appropriate regulatory channels. Her phrasing was careful, deliberate. An administrative hold has been placed on the remaining funds pending outcome, she added. Duration cannot be predicted. Outcomes depend on intent findings and document verification. After the call ended, I documented the time, the exact wording, and the reference number she provided. That afternoon, I requested transaction trace confirmation from the external credit union listed on the cashier's checks. They would not disclose account holder details without formal request, but they confirmed receipt dates clustered within the same 8-day window. The pattern did not expand, it tightened. When Ryan arrived at the house that evening, he stood in the driveway longer than usual. He made 3 phone calls before coming inside. His tone was lower than normal. I understand, he said at the end of each call. At dinner, he was controlled. You spoke to the bank, he said. Yes. They told you nothing. They told me enough. He reached for his phone again. Administrative reviews take time, he said. It doesn't mean anything. But he did not meet my eyes. The next morning, I received confirmation that documentation had been forwarded to a regional investigative unit for formal assessment. The letter was brief. We acknowledge receipt. Reference number attached. Do not attempt corrective transfers during review period. No prediction, no reassurance. I reviewed the cognitive screening again that afternoon. 21 out of 30. The evaluation recommended assistance with financial decision-making. The assistance agreement had been executed 10 days later. The timing remained unchanged. 2 days later, internal compliance called again. Preliminary findings indicate structured withdrawal activity, she said. We are validating authorization scope at time of each transaction. Was authorization active during the first withdrawal? I asked. Yes, it was modified 3 days prior. And the second? Also active. Her answers were precise. What happens if intent is determined? There are several possible outcomes, she said. Administrative restitution, account reclassification, referral. Referral to whom? We cannot speculate. That evening, Ryan requested copies of all shared financial documents. I need everything for my records. He remained in the study scanning files. The printer paused once at the transaction summary page that listed the clustered transfers and the $41,200 in cashier's checks. When he left, he locked the cabinet. 2 days later, a certified envelope arrived addressed to him. Return address, Regulatory Oversight Division. He opened it alone. He read the first page twice. Then he stepped outside with his phone. I received it. Yes, I will cooperate. The hold on the remaining funds remained active. Mortgage autopay was flagged, but allowed under review exemption. Utility drafts continued. Controlled. Monitored. On the 4th day of escalation, I received a voicemail. Documentation regarding the external deposits has been requested formally. Processing time varies. I reviewed the 6 transfers again, each structured below reporting thresholds, each executed within days of one another, together contributing to the total $84,600 movement. Ryan stopped using the mobile banking portal after that week. Instead, he called directly. He requested supervisors. He asked about timelines. He did not raise his voice, but he no longer laughed. 3 days later, a second letter arrived addressed to both of us. Do not alter account structure. Do not attempt asset redistribution. Retain all documentation. The language was procedural, but irreversible. That night, he sat across from me in silence. They're treating this like something criminal, he said. They're treating it like something reviewable, I answered. He gathered the letters carefully and returned them to their envelopes. For the first time since the withdrawals began, he looked uncertain. Not afraid, uncertain. Nothing had been resolved. Nothing had been dismissed. But the matter had moved beyond interpretation, and neither of us could move it back. The first formal interview request arrived on a Tuesday morning. It was not aggressive. It was not accusatory. It was structured. A regional investigative officer requested voluntary clarification regarding authorization timing, transaction intent, and beneficiary routing. The meeting would be conducted remotely. Both parties were invited separately. Ryan read the notice twice. They're calling it clarification, he said. That's not the same as investigation. I did not respond. The administrative hold on the remaining balance continued. The frozen portion now represented slightly under half of what had originally been moved. The documented total of $84,600 remained under structured review, including the $41,200 in cashier's checks deposited externally. The language in the notice was precise. Failure to participate may result in independent determination based on available documentation. Not a threat, procedure. Ryan scheduled his interview for Thursday afternoon. Mine was set for Friday morning. On Wednesday evening, he placed a folder on the dining table. Inside were printed copies of the assistance agreement, account modification confirmations, and a handwritten timeline he had prepared. He had underlined the date of authorization change. He had circled the word voluntary. They'll see this, he said. It was documented. He did not mention the cognitive screening score of 21 out of 30. Thursday came quietly. He dressed formally for a video call conducted from the study. The door remained closed for nearly 90 minutes. His voice, when audible through the wall, remained controlled. Yes, I understand. That was within my authority at the time. There were long pauses between his responses. When he exited, his expression was not defensive. It was concentrated. Their verifying sequence, he said, nothing more. Did they ask about intent? I asked. They asked about purpose. And? I said household management. He poured a glass of water and drank it slowly. They have the documentation, he added. The next morning, my interview began at 9 a.m. The investigator introduced himself with title and badge number. His tone matched the compliance officer's neutrality from weeks prior. He confirmed receipt of all documentation I had provided, including medical evaluation, transaction summaries, and account modification logs. "We are establishing chronology," he said. He reviewed the timeline step by step. March 9th, cognitive screening score 2130. March 12th, authorization level adjusted. March 19th, assistance agreement executed. Clustered transfers and withdrawals began within days. 4 cashier's checks totaling $41,200 issued and deposited externally. "Did your father understand the scope of the assistance agreement?" he asked. He trusted the person placing it in front of him. "Did he request structured withdrawals?" "No." "Did he request removal of your access?" "No." The investigator did not react. "Was there discussion of asset redistribution prior to the transactions?" "No." He paused. "We are also reviewing communication records between account holders during this period." That detail had not been mentioned before. After the call ended, I wrote down every question in sequence. The following Monday, a formal notice of extended review was issued. The language changed subtly. Preliminary findings indicate sufficient basis for continued regulatory assessment, not closure, expansion. The external credit union confirmed receipt of a formal inquiry from regulatory authorities. Account routing details had been requested through official channels. Ryan received that update the same afternoon. He did not speak immediately. Instead, he placed his phone face down and stepped outside again. This time, the call lasted longer. I complied, yes, fully. Another pause. There was no concealment. When he returned, he avoided the study. That night, he gathered additional paperwork, tax returns, property records, archived statements. He arranged them into labeled stacks. Preparation had replaced dismissal. 2 days later, a temporary restriction was placed on the external credit union account, pending document verification. The deposited $41,200 was not reversed, but it was flagged for review linkage. The system was not reacting emotionally. It was tightening in layers. Mortgage and utilities remained operational under essential expenditure exemption. No public notices, no charges, no accusations. But correspondence frequency increased. 3 separate departments were now listed in the headers of incoming letters: compliance, regulatory oversight, financial review division. Each communication contained the same directive: do not alter account structure, retain all documentation, cooperate with scheduled inquiries. Ryan requested clarification regarding duration. The response was consistent. Timeline depends on findings. That uncertainty lingered in every room of the house. He began checking the mailbox personally. He stopped making dismissive comments. He no longer framed it as misunderstanding. One evening, he asked quietly, "If they determine intent, what happens?" I said, "It depends." On what, I did not specify. 3 weeks into review escalation, a formal reconciliation request was issued. Both of us were required to submit sworn statements verifying knowledge of the transactions and the condition of the account holder at the time of execution. Sworn. The language was no longer casual. Ryan read that word carefully. "They're escalating classification," he said. "They're documenting," I replied. He nodded once. For the first time, he did not attempt to reinterpret the situation. The administrative hold remained. The structured transfers remained documented at a total movement of $84,600. The 4 cashier's checks totaling $41,200 remained under linked review. No one had declared wrongdoing. No one had cleared it either. The system had shifted from inquiry to formal evaluation. And once evaluation begins under oath, outcomes no longer depend on explanation alone. They depend on record. Ryan sat at the dining table late that night, drafting his sworn statement. He crossed out several sentences before finalizing the language. When he finished, he aligned the pages carefully, placed them into an envelope, and sealed it without speaking. Across from him, the stack of compliance letters remained organized by date. Nothing had collapsed, nothing had resolved, but the distance between documentation and consequence had narrowed, and both of us understood that once sworn records are entered into a regulatory file, they do not disappear. They remain. The investigator did not raise her voice when she returned to the conference room. She adjusted the file in front of her, aligned the pages, and read from the classification sheet as if she were confirming a mailing address. Based on transaction sequencing, cognitive assessment timing, and structured withdrawal behavior, this matter is being evaluated under state statute governing financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. No one interrupted her this time. The word civil was not used again. Across the table, my brother's attorney asked whether that designation was temporary. "It is active pending final review," she replied. "The administrative hold remains in effect." The number was read into the record without emphasis. Total reviewed movement, $84,600. 9 withdrawals clustered within 18 days. 4 cashier's checks totaling $41,200. Cognitive screening score, 21/30. Documented 5 days before execution of a 17-page voluntary financial assistance agreement. The sequence did not require commentary. It required alignment. The bank's compliance officer joined remotely. She confirmed that internal monitoring had flagged structured activity under reporting thresholds, but had not escalated beyond standard review at the time. Once the medical record date was provided, she said carefully, the transaction context changed. My brother did not argue. He asked whether funds had been permanently frozen. Not permanently, the investigator said, temporarily restricted pending tracing and recovery analysis. Recovery. That was the first time the word had been used in that room. Within 72 hours, a tracing order was issued to the external credit union where the 4 cashier's checks had been deposited. The account remained operational for essential transactions, but was flagged for regulatory cooperation. Documentation was requested regarding disbursement of the $41,200. Simultaneously, the primary bank initiated a forensic reconciliation of the full $84,600. 3 days later, a preliminary recovery update was circulated. Of the total amount reviewed, $31,200 remained intact in the external account and was secured under administrative instruction. The remaining balance had been distributed across mortgage prepayments, vehicle purchase transfers, and inter-account movements. Intent was not declared. Sequence was. The investigator scheduled a formal resolution meeting under supervisory review. My brother appeared with the same attorney, though his posture had shifted. The language was more careful. He stated that he believed the assistance agreement provided authority for financial management. The investigator did not challenge the statement emotionally. She placed 2 documents side by side. On the left, the cognitive screening dated March 9. On the right, the assistance agreement signed March 14, 5 days apart. Authority exercised after documented cognitive decline requires heightened scrutiny, she said, particularly when transactions are structured in increments below reporting thresholds. She referenced the 9 withdrawals, each under $9,500. The room remained silent. The bank compliance officer confirmed that once reclassified, the case required protective intervention under elder financial protection guidelines. Protective intervention, not punishment. Protection. A formal proposal was introduced. Immediate restitution of the secured $31,200. Structured repayment agreement for the remaining traced balance scheduled over 18 months with documented verification. The vehicle title transfer that had been pending was formally suspended and later voided under review findings. A court hearing was scheduled to finalize fiduciary appointment. In the courtroom, the judge reviewed the compiled file, 26-page transaction summary, 8-page medical assessment, internal bank memo noting monitoring activity, investigator classification report. My brother did not contest the appointment. The judge approved the installation of a licensed fiduciary with quarterly reporting requirements. My access was restored as informational contact only, no authority beyond oversight. That distinction mattered. The family attorney withdrew representation 2 weeks later, citing resolution of the matter. There were no raised voices in the courthouse hallway, no public confrontation, only documentation signed and archived. 35 days after the initial classification, the investigator issued a final written finding. The record reflects financial control exercised following documented cognitive impairment. Transaction patterns demonstrated structured movement of funds consistent with exploitation indicators. Protective measures were implemented to safeguard the vulnerable adult assets. The phrase civil dispute did not appear anywhere in the document. My father's accounts stabilized under fiduciary management. Monthly statements were sent to all listed contacts. No further clustered withdrawals occurred. The repayment installments began on schedule. There were no apologies. There was no dramatic confession. There was compliance. One evening, weeks after the final order, my brother stood in the driveway holding a copy of the repayment schedule. He did not accuse me of escalation. He did not call it a misunderstanding. He said quietly, "I didn't think it would turn into this." I did not respond. It had not turned into anything. It had followed a pattern. Inside the house, the file cabinet drawer containing certified letters, medical records, and transaction logs remained organized by date. Preparation had never been retaliation. Documentation had never been aggression. Silence had never been ignorance. The system had not reacted to emotion. It had reacted to numbers. $84,600 in total reviewed movement. $31,200 secured immediately. Remaining balance structured under monitored repayment. 9 withdrawals within 18 days. 4 cashier's checks. 1 cognitive score, 21/30. 5 days between evaluation and authorization transfer. The sequence spoke without assistance. At the final compliance confirmation call, the investigator paused before ending the line. These cases are often dismissed as family disagreements. They rarely are. The call ended. There was no celebration in the room, only quiet. My father sat in his chair near the window, unaware of the administrative language that had surrounded his name for weeks. The fiduciary had scheduled a quarterly review. His bills were paid, his accounts balanced. Order had been restored without spectacle. They believed it was a civil disagreement. The record reflected something else. It was never about argument, it was about sequence. And sequence, once documented, does not defend itself. It confirms itself.